It's a dangerous business stepping out your front door. You step your foot on the road, and if you don't keep your footing, you don't know where you'll be swept off to. I can't get the quote right, but we are here to go on a Lord of the Rings adventure with Fate of the Fellowship while I do my solo mode check where I ask whether this game is worthy of your shelf space if you were only to play it solo. Let's get into it, shall we? Hello everybody and welcome to the Boardgaymergirl channel. If you're new here, my name is Natalie and I like to talk about all things board games, but from a primarily solo perspective. Today we are very lucky to be in the presence of greatness. No, we will figure that out as this review goes, but I am very excited to be able to do a solo mode check episode on Lord of the Rings Fate of the Fellowship because Asmodee Canada and Z-Man Games offered me a review copy, and trust me, this was difficult to find on my own. But it was one of my most anticipated games of the last year, so that could mean good or bad things. I mean, I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Let me also put that out there. Lord of the Rings, the LCG is one of my favorite games of all time. I've gotten a whole bunch of different board games from Lord of the Rings, so we'll see how this one fits in. But if you are unfamiliar with the pandemic system, I think we should start there because the foundation of this game is built off of the backs of the modern board game hit Pandemic. So, in Pandemic, you are basically trying to let the world not be taken over by disease. You may be familiar with what a pandemic is if you were around 6 years ago when we lived in one. And I was a nurse, and I don't like to talk about it. But I digress. In Pandemic, you are basically trying to control diseases so that you get to a point where you have cured the diseases on the board and sometimes even luckily eradicated some in order to win. But you and your other players who have asymmetrical role abilities to help in this quest to rid the world of the diseases that are taking over the world are working together in order to do this, but you can lose the game in a lot of different ways. One is that you have an outbreak and you go to get a cube of a particular disease and it is no longer there, which means that disease went out of control and you lost the game. You ran out of time by running out of cards from your player deck in which you draw from. So on your turn, if you go to draw a card and there is no card to draw, you have run out of time to save the world. The last thing is that there is a danger track, and like Will Robinson, danger Will Robinson, you do not want that to get out of control because if it goes past its final marker, you've also lost the game. And there's only one way you win it, and that is if you get rid of all of the diseases by trading in different cards at different research stations to win the game. Now, with that very brief overhead of Pandemic, they've taken that system and incorporated it in many different iterations over the years, but now it is Lord of the Rings time, and Lord of the Rings has definitely made some changes to the Pandemic system that work really well thematically with Lord of the Rings in general. Before we get into my opinion on whether this is a good iteration, a bad iteration, what pros and cons are for this game, and whether it's worthy of your shelf space if you only played it solo, we've got to get into how the game plays for Lord of the Rings Fate of the Fellowship. So firstly, upon setup, you will have to take the Frodo objective where you'll be trying to take Frodo from the Shire to Mordor into Mount Doom to drop that little precious ring in, like you're dropping salt on some steak. But that is a #1 objective, and you cannot complete that objective until you have completed the other 4. The other 4 are randomly chosen, but they may change setup in some ways. Some may include putting different ally troops out or on one of the cards until you have successfully completed it. And other ones say that one of the players at the table will have to pick that character when choosing characters at the beginning of the game. Once the objectives are done, you can do your general setup, which includes doing a shadow deck thing here and a player deck over here. and then all the different troops on the board. With your character, you will also have a particular spot on the map to place them, along with asymmetrical powers that can either be passive or actions that will count during your action phase to use during the game strategically to help move Frodo along and complete different objectives. Now, for you to succeed, you obviously need to complete all of the objectives that you possibly can, with the Frodo one being the final one. But you can lose this game in multiple ways. In this game, if you ever have to add an enemy piece, so one of these little baby Mordor people, if you have to place them on the board and you don't have any more in your supply, then you've lost the game. If at any point your team loses hope, because instead of that danger track, we have the hope track, and if you lose all of your hope, then all hope is lost and you've lost the game. And the last way that you can lose the game is similar to the original Pandemic, where you've run out of time because your player cards have all run out. So 3 different ways to win, 3 different ways to lose, 1 way to win. And I will say that obviously there are differences between the multiplayer game and the solo game. So for setup, every person will have to take 2 characters instead of in the solo game where you'll be controlling 4 characters. In the multiplayer game, you take actions differently, but in the solo game particularly, you'll have your characters kind of lined up, and as you have them lined up, you'll have to take the order of turns based on the characters as you go on. You'll have a different kind of token so that you can keep track of which character you're currently playing as, and as you wrap up that character's turn, you'll move that token next, and that character will have to go next. And you'll continue in that order, the same order, as you go through the whole game. On your turn, your character or the Frodo character can take 4 actions, and then the character you don't choose to utilize for 4 actions takes 1 action. So you'll always be utilizing Frodo no matter what, but how you want to allocate your turns for either Frodo or the character you are presently playing is up to you. So, what actions can you take? Well, there are 6 different actions in this game, and let me briefly go over it. The first one, and maybe the easiest one, is the travel action. And one travel action consists of you moving one of your characters from one spot to another spot. That's it. That's all. When you travel, if you have another character with you at the location that you're moving from, you can take a character or one of your friendly allies with you to the new location. As you do this as well, there are some paths that you need a particular token in order to cross. And that is because you need to be more stealthy, because it is a dangerous place when you step out your front door. And that is where some of these different tokens come in. So there are different ring tokens, there are stealth tokens, there are friendship tokens, and there are fighting tokens. So on the map, sometimes you'll see these different symbols in between moving from one spot to another. And that means that you'll have to pay one of those symbols either by having one of those tokens disregarded or discarded. Disregarded sounds really, whoa, too much. Or you can discard one of the cards that have a symbol on it. And the next action is the fellowship action. And this is where you and another character share a space and share knowledge. And this usually means that you are going to give one of your cards to another player in some way. It might be useful for what they might be trying to do next turn, especially if it's got a particular symbol or icon on the card that they'll need to go through another action. But in the solo game, this action doesn't really work because you are working with your whole team at once. And with that, you're using a same communal hand for all of your characters. I believe the card limit that you have for your hand is either 7 cards, I believe. And because of that, the next action might be a little bit more important. And that is the prepare action. And the prepare action is one that if your character ends up in a haven, so there are 2 different kinds of stronghold areas. So a haven is kind of indicated by a yellow line, and if your character's there, they're kind of more safer. If you're in a stronghold enemy one, it's outlined with like black and red, and it's a yuck yuck zone. I have great terminology. But if you're in a haven, then you can trade one of your cards out and instead just get the matching icons. So for this Rohirrian, oh, I'm gonna get poo-pooed on the comments for that pronunciation. But for this card, it has a little ring token. So then you can just take the token into your area and get rid of the card. And then you're able to still have that icon while increasing the cards that you're allowed to keep in your hand. Now, for the solo game, it is a little different because the card that you are going to trade has to match the region that you are currently in. So if you're doing the Rohirrian card and exchanging that, you have to be in a haven, and a haven that includes this location so that you can take that action. So it's just a little bit more difficult in the solo game. Then another action that is very important is the muster action, which goes with the attack action, but I'll get more into that in a second. So the muster action is how you are able to accrue more allies into the land. And when you're battling, it is only your allies that are going to be counting to try to take on any of the armies that are on the board. So the muster location means that your character is in a particular area of the land that has a different symbol allocated to those allies. So the elves, the dwarves, you know, all these other ones. And if you're in one of those particular areas that have that symbol, you can use a muster action, which means discarding one of these friendship tokens or a friendship card, so that you can do one muster, which means adding one ally to that area. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when you travel, you can take these allies with you as you move across the board, maybe setting up for a big epic battle. But these are important because you can also attack as an action. So if you're in an area where you have ally troops and there are enemy troops, then you can take an attack action. During that turn, you will have up to 3 dice that you can roll on your turn, but you have to have at least 3 allies in order to roll 3 dice. You don't have to roll all 3. You can choose to maybe just roll 1, because anytime you're rolling one of the dice, you risk possibly losing some of your own allies while in the battle. One way you can mitigate these dice rolls is by having these little sword tokens, as these sword tokens allow you to get rid of an enemy no matter the results of your dice roll. So in order to use those tokens, though, you do have to go into attack mode and roll at least 1 dice so that you can get rid of that enemy figure. The last action is that you can capture, and if you are in an enemy stronghold and there are no enemy little recruits around and you have yourself and allies in that area, then you can capture that location and turn it into a haven location, which also increases your hope. So it's lovely. Do it. It means the fellowship is gaining ground. But that is the main part of every turn that you're taking. And again, you may have different special actions that each character has that will go outside of these main actions, but that is up to you to figure out on your own. I feel a little Rodney Smith. But you'll do 4 actions with one character, then 1 action with another, and then you'll have to go to the end of your turn, which means you'll be drawing up 2 cards from this player deck. And again, most of them will show that they have an icon and a land area that they are located from. But some of the time, you'll come across these very bad cards. In Pandemic, they were called Outbreak cards. In Lord of the Rings, they are called Sky Darkens card. And this is how you will level off your difficulty for the game. So in an easy game, you'll have 4 of these in the deck. In a standard, you'll have 5. And if you want to go loco, you can have more. But this game is already hard enough as it is. So good luck. But The Skies Darkens cards, when you do pick them up, they do count as one of the cards that you're drawing from the deck that turn. The Skies Darkens cards work from top to bottom. They'll include having to add new armies to the board. They'll also have you look at where the Eye of Sauron is on the board in relation to where Frodo is. Because if the Eye of Sauron is where Frodo is in a region, then you lose hope. But if he's not, then you move the eye to look at Frodo again. A lot of the game is trying to distract the Eye of Sauron from not looking at Frodo. Very Christina Aguilera, don't look at me. If you get that reference, you might be as old as I am. But the other thing is that it will also intensify the danger, and there is a danger track, or in this one, a threat track, where as you move that token up, you will have to draw more and more shadow cards on your turn, and these shadow cards are always bad. So in this game, it is an interesting take on turning over these bad cards. In Pandemic, they would kind of just populate the cubes in different areas on the board, and you'd have to turn over more and more city cards. In this one, you'll have to flip the card over, and then you'll have to look at how the opposite side of the card is symbolized. So if there's a flag on the card on the top of the shadow deck, then you'll have to take the top action. If there is a flag on the bottom side of the shadow deck, then you'll have to take the bottom action of these shadow cards. And the top of these cards will typically show you a area of enemies that you would like to move closer to an area. So for this one, you are moving from the ruin to the woodland realm. And starting in the ruin, you will look at if you have any of the armies of Sauron in that area and move them one spot closer along the line all the way through that. So if you have enemies in two different areas, they will both move one spot closer. If at any point one of those enemies ends up in a spot that has ally figures, then a battle will ensue in the favor of the enemies. If you're doing the bottom action, then these will typically have you populate more of these enemy figures onto the board in a particular area, and may also move the Nazgul around the board, either closer to Mordor or to a particular place. And on your turn, you have to do everything that is indicated by flipping over these cards, but you will have to flip over as many cards as the threat rate indicates. So in the beginning of the game, you are starting with 2 cards being flipped over, but the more times you have Skies Darkens cards come out, the higher that threat rate comes, and the more cards you will have to flip out. So everything intensifies and gets loco. But there are 2 special cards that don't start in the deck when you begin the game, and that includes the Wheels of Saruman and the Drums of War. The Drums of War card, when it's flipped over, means that you're going to be adding enemy pieces into all of the areas of Mordor. So they come out a lot and a lot. And remember, one of the things you need to keep track of is that you don't run out of enemy pieces, so that when you have to place them, you still have them. Otherwise, you lose the game. Then another one is the Wheels of Saruman. And this gives you 3 different options of bad things that'll happen, but you can pick at least between them which bad thing you want to have happen. And those 3 different bad things include either losing hope, having to discard cards, or having to get rid of friendly troops that are on the board. All poo-poo things to do. Now, if the Skies Darkens cards come out, another thing that you have to deal with is any cards that are currently in your discard, you have to shuffle up and put on top of the shadow deck again. And that means anything that you had seen before is going to be coming out again. And in one way, it helps you understand what may be coming out. But in another way, you know bad things are just going to keep compiling in the areas that you've already dealt with. So there's a lot of trying to keep on top of things while getting your objectives done. So that is pretty much the way that you're playing the game, and you're trying to get rid of your objectives. If at one point one of the fail situations come up, you've lost the game and the game ends, or you've actually gone to Mordor and thrown the ring in. And this typically means that you've got Frodo through into Mordor, where there's a lot of stealth icons where you'll have to move around in order just to get there. but you'll have to make a final stealth roll. And this is something I haven't gotten into that is next to the travel action, as I wanted to kind of explain everything else before I got into it. So if you are traveling, you are able to take ally characters or other characters with you as you're moving across the board. But there is a different situation that occurs if you are carrying Frodo with you, or in general if Frodo is moving. And that is that you have to roll a search roll because the Nazgul are out to get you, little Frodo. You need to hide. Or the Fellowship needs to distract. So for the search rolls, these will depend entirely on, one, how many Nazguls are in kind of like a provincial area, and then how many enemy figures are going to be in the area that Frodo is moving into. Based on that number, you will have to take a certain number of search dice to roll on your turn. The maximum amount of search dice that you can roll on a turn is 7. And for the search dice, you could roll blanks, you could end up losing hope, you could lose hope if you're not going to or currently in a haven, and then you could also end up moving different Nazgul back to Mordor. Some of the ways that you can mitigate these dice rolls is by using some of these little ring tokens, and you'll be able to re-roll a dice if you feel you would like to. Now, the reason that I mention the rolls now is that for the final objective, Frodo needs to get into Mordor at the Mount Doom location with 5 symbols, so either these tokens or 5 different cards with those symbols, or a mix and match of either thing, along with rolling a final search die. And the 5 tokens have to be utilized to throw the precious ring into Mount Doom. But you also have to be ready to mitigate any of the dice rolls, because if you lose hope on this final roll, then you lose the game. And you could end up, as long as you have 1 hope at the end of the game when you're going to throw the ring into Mount Doom, you have won the game. It's very difficult to do, and I'll get into that in a second, trust me. But that is kind of the last thing to explain on the general overview of this game, and now we'll get into the main part of this review. I think first off, I'm just going to touch on all of the components to get that out of the way, because it is a pro and a con. The pros include that I am very happy that they didn't work for miniatures for the characters and instead have the little meeples with, I think they're like screen printed art of the characters on them. I feel like also having all of the different meeples for the characters being different colors makes it easy to track out on the board for most of them. The other thing is that the tokens are thick cardboard at least. The dice I do appreciate, and they are kind of engraved a little bit. And then the cards are good material. I don't need to shuffle, well, you do need to shuffle them, but you do not need to sleeve them. They shuffle quite well. And then, of course, the magnificent dice tower of the eye that I want to keep on display different places. The only difficulty with that is that even though they have instructions of how to put it together and then how to place it in the box, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to fit back in there. The other thing is that all of the different ally and enemy figures are very teeny tiny. And for someone who probably has big hands and big fingers, this could get finicky and annoying. But I do think it's the right choice because they help make it clearer on the board for when you're placing them, especially when some of these places are going to be crowded, so that the board doesn't get too difficult to read. And I do think that the print and everything is pretty clear. Again, some of the art can get difficult, and as the board gets more and more crowded, it can be a thing, but it's as good as it could possibly probably be, and keep it thematic. The only component that I do have a problem with are these little Nazgul, and these Nazguls are thematically neat for having, like, they'll stand over the figures in an area. So you'll have the enemy forces, your allies, even your characters underneath them as they're kind of, what do they do? Fly? Flying around and trying to look for Frodo. So thematically, the piece works. The execution of the piece, I'm not as sure, because these kind of get finicky and fall over pretty easily. And the components fitting together, so the little stand with the little minifigure, sometimes have a difficulty like going in and staying in, which can get annoying. But that is a general overview for at least the components. Now let's get into different pros and cons of the game itself. So I think that this is probably the strongest reimagining of the pandemic system so far, and they have built tons and tons of different pandemic systems. I will not include the legacy versions of pandemic. I find that completely different than just a regular board game where you sit down, have your one session, and the game's done. So setting that aside, this is the best like regular board game rendition of the pandemic system. Of course, grain of salt, I like Lord of the Rings. So this just literally feels like you are going on the full journey of the 3 books of Lord of the Rings. So the Fellowship, the Two Towers, and Return of the King. And you'll go through different moments on the board, if you know Lord of the Rings, where it'll feel really special. Like you'll go to Rivendell and you'll have a whole bunch of your Fellowship characters all there together. Or you'll go to Minas Tirith and have like an epic battle that'll go down. And you can tell your own stories while you're playing the game yourself. But in general, it's also just a really great game if you have no reference of Lord of the Rings, because you're still taking characters, you have missions to complete, and you have different battles with various tension based off of the dice rolls. For what I find as the biggest change to the pandemic system is that in the original pandemic, if you have to place a 3rd cube anywhere on the board, it would start an outbreak, and that would lead to too many cubes being in one area, and therefore the disease spreads to different locations that are connected to that main location that was affected. In this one, we don't have that happen ever at all, never, which is very nice. But it still doesn't mean that if you run out of a particular resource that you will still lose the game. So in pandemic, if you run out of a particular disease cube, then you've lost the game. In this one, if you run out of any enemy troops that you need to place on the board at any time, you've instantly lost the game. So any of these areas can have multiple sets of armies, and I've had it at times where it feels like I've got maybe 8 enemy figures in one area, and to try to go to battle with that will definitely take more than one round unless I have accumulated tons and tons of these little fighting warrior tokens. So it's a whole interesting new dynamic to take on, to figure out strategically, not letting the armies get too large in any area, or if you think you can completely avoid them by just trying to rush your butt to Mount Doom, then you're in for a sorry surprise, because you do have to mitigate the battles and try to get rid of some of the enemy figures so that they can repopulate later without you having to worry. And then another great change is that, like those outbreak things, or if you get a pandemic card from the player deck, then for the Skies Darkens one, you never know where the enemy figures are going to go, because every Skies Darkened card has a different location for these enemy figures to populate in. So I do appreciate that, and that kind of variance, along with the Shadow deck, where you never know what kind of thing you're going to run into. Are they going to move enemies along a trail, or are they just going to populate enemies to a specific place and move Nazgul? So it keeps it interesting to have different variations of how things are going to work, which makes it a little bit more strategical than I think Foundation of Pandemic is. The next thing, and I think the biggest pro, is the amount of replayability and variance in the game. So as I mentioned already with the Skies Darken and the Shadow card deck, those have variations in them, but the sheer amount of objectives that you can have, the different characters that you can pool together on one of your quests or adventures, and then also there are event cards, which I forgot to talk about. But in the main game, there are event cards that kind of give you one-time bonuses. And in this game, they have them as well. And they are also one-time bonus events that come out. So there's a whole bunch of variations that you might not play every single one while you're playing this game. So just a lot of replayability in general overall. Now, for some of the difficulty, and I mean, this one is going to be something that I think a lot of people are going to say, and that is dice rolling. So dice rolling in any kind of game throws in a whole bunch of luck. And I think the dice rolling in particular is the most important when you get to that last objective and going to Mount Doom. And going through a game for an hour to 2 hours or so, or maybe even 3 hours actually. I don't know how long my first play was, and I think it was pretty long. But the last thing that you're doing in the game is trying to get Frodo to Mount Doom. When you get Frodo to Mount Doom, you're trying to collect these little ring tokens, and you have to roll the search dice. And more often than not, you are probably going to be rolling all 7 dice. And if you don't have your hope track high enough, or don't have a whole bunch of that icon extra to mitigate those dice, then you're going to lose. And that in itself, one thing is that losing a game on a dice roll really sucks. And then second of all is a lot of the games that I've played solo at least is I'll get through the objectives, there's tension, it's fun, it's great, but then the game kind of drags because you're preparing to get Frodo to Mount Doom, and sometimes you're just searching for a symbol, and that can only come up sometimes if you've got a particular character that can give you some of the symbols that you need, or if you're drawing cards from the deck, which is only 2 at a time at the end of a character's turn, to search for that icon. And therefore you kind of have a slower point of the game. And I think there's at least 2 times where I kind of stalled my game because I was looking for particular things in order to get and prepare for that end game. And then through that, you only have so many cards in the deck that you can go through. So that's the only thing that has, like, it's a really difficult thing to deal with. And if that kind of feels like something that makes you poo-poo on this style of cooperative board game, then maybe this isn't for you. But again, I in general have enjoyed the game as a Lord of the Rings adventure that takes me on an adventure that I don't think any other board game has matched. I don't know if it's my favorite Lord of the Rings board game in general. I still think Lord of the Rings, the LCG, is my favorite Lord of the Rings game. And then I would still think that Lord of the Rings, the trick-taking game, but that's more really great for the mechanic and the solo that it has in it. But if you're looking for a Lord of the Rings board game, this is probably the best Lord of the Rings board games there is out there. I will say I haven't tried the Journeys version of Lord of the Rings. Maybe that's different, but that I feel is more like dungeon crawly. This one just feels like a one and done adventure that has the pandemic roots. And with the pandemic roots, if you don't like Pandemic, you might not like this game, because that is still the foundation that this is built upon. And I think that even with the great differences that they've made to improve the system, it's a system that's kind of aged over the years. And there's a whole bunch of cooperative new games. And I found Pandemic to be more of the gateway cooperative adventure game to go on. The rules are kind of very streamlined, very simple, and you can knock out one of those games in like 45 minutes or less. But this one is definitely a bit longer because there is a bit more strategy into it and a lot more rules or a character, asymmetric abilities and things going on. You could lose this really quick, but it can go very long as well. And I just think that the Pandemic system in general has aged over the years, and it does show in this board game. That again, personal opinion. But I do want to let you know about that. If you haven't played Pandemic before, You could probably get into this right away. If you haven't played a cooperative game and this is your first cooperative game, this might not be the place to start, but this is like a Gateway Plus game or a Pandemic Plus game. So if you've already played Pandemic, this is a great way to try a different system out. If you want a little bit more difficulty, if you want a bit more nuance, then this one is for you. If you like Lord of the Rings, this is a great game to add to your collection for that theme alone. So in general, I think this game isn't going to change your mind if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, but also, or maybe not a Pandemic fan, this game just may not sit for you. But if either of those things appeal to you, and if you're a solo gamer, I do think this is a great enough game to keep in your collection. It was for me, at least. I have played it a few times now solo. I haven't won yet. The closest one I got was getting to Mount Doom and losing by 1 dice roll. So maybe I'm just bitter when I say my dice roll comment. So take that into account when I'm talking about the game. But it oozes Lord of the Rings theme, and I've been very tired out with Pandemic in general. This made me feel like coming home to Pandemic for me. I still remember being in nursing school, and it was when I was starting to learn that there were actual solo modes, because before that I just played Pandemic over and over and over again by just playing two-handed while I played. So this was like a nice welcome home, but also Lord of the Rings welcome home. So the only other thing that I want to say is that obviously, as I just mentioned, I've played Pandemic before, so having an impression of this game without the knowledge of Pandemic, I can't speak to. But if you haven't played Pandemic and you've played Lord of the Rings Fate of the Fellowship, let me know in the comments below, because I am curious to know what your impression would be if you'd never played Pandemic at all. But also just tell me if you've had any experiences or if you've had any pivotal moments while you're playing that seem so story awesome. I am not working with words today, but that is it for today's episode of Solo Mode Check. I'll get back to doing more of these in a little bit, but for now, I am done. So have a fantastical day, and I can't remember a Lord of the Rings quote when I'd like to remember one. So goodbye!